Peace. For all y'all that got 120 or you're studying your lessons right now, I just wanted to take it to the degrees for a minute to show you how to unlock the lessons to make them applicable to your life. And a lot of times, we just read some of the lessons on face value and we can't really relate them to our lives, but I just wanted to break one of them down for you so you can get a sense of how we actually do it. The sixth degree, or six, represents equality. The sixth degree in the 1 to 14s asks the question, why does the devil teach and keep our people illiterate? I emphasize the word why. The answer to that lesson is so that he can use them for a tool and also as a slave. He keeps them blind to themselves so he can master them. Illiterate means ignorant. So suppose you're having a conversation with somebody based upon the premise of why, right? That's debatable because now you're sitting there telling another person their reasoning or motive behind what they were actually doing. And as long as it's in the arena of why, they could deny that all day. You could be working for a company and that the manager or the supervisor don't like you. They're always doing things to try to make it more difficult for you, and ultimately somewhere down the line you end up losing your job. And the reasoning why was like a fine mist the naked eye could hardly detect. And suppose you wanted to take it to a hearing, or you even wanted to file a lawsuit or something like that. If you went into court talking about the reason why they did what they did, then you're not going to be too successful in a court of law, because why is not being substantiated. You can't just sit there and tell a person what their motive is or determine idea behind why and what they're actually doing. So the same thing with that lesson when it's dealing with why does the devil teach and keep our people illiterate. You have to take it out of the arena of just why or what this person's motive is or determined idea is, and put it within the context of who, how, where, when, and what. For example, instead of just saying why does the devil teach and keep our people illiterate, ask yourself the question, well, how does the devil teach and keep our people illiterate? Because now you're putting it in an arena where it's not really debatable. Because if you go back into like the 1800s and you see that by law, black people were not allowed to read and write because they were the property of Caucasians during the time of slavery, then you can see how we were taught to keep our people illiterate and to be used as tools and also as slaves. That's not debatable. That's historical record. So you have to be able to identify how these things were done, what machinations or mechanisms were in place, how they actually functioned, how they operated to yield certain type of results of teaching and keeping your people illiterate and using them as tools and as slaves. As long as you're just talking about why they're doing it, people could just deny that and you could go back and forth and play psychological volleyball all day. But now when you're talking about how it's actually used and what the functions were, how something operated to bring forth certain results, now that ain't debatable. Another question that you have to ask is, what did the devil use to teach and keep our people illiterate? Again, you can look at certain type of institutions that were established, religious entities, business entities, governmental structures, and how these elements of a system were used and are used to teach and keep people illiterate. For example, you could just look at commercials on television and see that they're designed to bypass your critical analytical thinking skills and just to appeal to your sense of greed or your sense of lust and just how you feel about things, but not necessarily analyzing things. That's just common knowledge when it comes to, marketing and promotion schemes as far as businesses are concerned. So what's actually used? That's another thing that's not really debatable, because you can substantiate how certain objects, certain institutions, certain ideologies, all of these things are serving a certain type of purpose to bring forth certain results. Where does the devil teach and keep our people illiterate? Now you're getting into not only geographic locations, but you're also getting into actual um, places. Are there certain type of religious institutions that promote ignorance? Are there certain educational institutions set up to dumb people down? These are all things that can be substantiated, and like I said, it gets you out of the arena of playing psychological volleyball with people, where you're trying to tell them what their motive and what their intentions are. It's not really about that. It's about being able to show and prove and demonstrate how certain things are used in certain places at certain times, because you also have to be able to show and prove when does the devil teach and keep our people illiterate, not only when it comes to past, present, but also historically. At when were certain type of laws passed, when were certain type of institutions established, or when were certain ideologies being promoted to show and prove that these are kept or designed to teach and keep people illiterate, and also make them as a tool and as a slave. Who's doing it? Who is this devil that's teaching and keeping our people illiterate? Now, see, the reason why I'm adding on about who, what, when, where, and also who, what, when, where, and how, is because it takes it out of the abstract. And as long as you're talking back and forth with people about why they did this, why they did that, it stays abstract. A person doesn't have to agree with that, but now when you're able to substantiate places and persons as far as who is concerned, and you're putting a face on it, or how something was used, and what was actually used, and where it took place, and at what time, and stuff like that, now in a court of law, you have a case. And a lot of times when people are approaching these lessons, they're not building a case because they're not necessarily doing the necessary research to substantiate these claims. We talk about the devil and things like that. That's not an emotional charged rhetoric. It's not propaganda. We're talking about identifiable entities in the form of ideologies, in the form of people who are using certain things, who are adhering to certain type of methodologies and functions to bring about certain type of results. And when we're talking about these lessons, that being the sixth degree or the equality degree, we're building about fairness. We're building about homeostasis. We're talking about just a basic sense of an equitable relationship. And that lesson, why does the devil teach and keep our people illiterate, where it says so they can use us for a tool and also as a slave to keep them blind to ourselves so we can master us. Illiterate means ignorant. That answer, like I said, is not emotionally charged rhetoric. It's not propaganda. That answer is based upon how. It's based upon what? It's based upon who, it's based upon when, and it's based upon where. And unless you can identify those 5 basic aspects to build a case against who you're saying is actually devil, then all you're doing is just name calling. And that's not something that we participate in. Everything that we build upon or we talk about is substantiated, and our charge is to show and prove. So those of you who are on that actual degree, or who have had that degree for a while, it's beyond just saying why does the devil do this, that, and the third. It's really about how, it's about when, it's about where, it's about what was actually used, and it's about who. Because if you can't make those claims, then, like I said, in a court of law, you ain't got no case. You know what I'm saying? And at the same time, it's important to be able to have the integrity to stand on the things that you're saying is the square or is the truth. So, willfully, that was clear, and it was inspiring, empowering, and educating to those of you who are dealing with these lessons, and to to get you to start thinking a little bit deeper than just what it's saying actually on the surface. Because once you start taking it beneath the surface and unlocking those lessons, you can see how it's applied in many different aspects of your life. Because as long as you just stay in the arena talking about why a person did this, why a person did that, now you're speculating. Now you're making interpretations. And as long as you could identify who this person actually is, what they were using, when they were using it, where they were using it, and how, then you got a case. Peace.